Hey guys, it's TheFrXion here, Tiger Tank 12, whoever you're calling, I don't really care. Welcome back to World of Tanks, where today we're taking a look at the Advent Calendar Day 16, and it's the Renegade, M54 Renegade American Tier 8 Heavy Tank, and it would have been a wet dream of mine when this tank first came out because it resembles the T110E5 so much, and that is my favorite Tier 10 tank of all time. But obviously by that time I already owned quite a few tier 8 premiums, so I still picked up the M41 Renegade, or M54 Renegade, excuse me. And it has been quite a handful. It's quite a cool tank, but there are some downsides to it. But I'd say they make the tank balanced. Now, I'm not one of those guys that needs to have an extremely overpowered vehicle, but it gives this tank a bit of a balancing factor, even though there are a lot of good things about the Renegade. So let's get right into it, because this tank has a lot of things for it. So, how much do you have to pay? Unfortunately, it's like too early for me. I can't really go into that window, but I know that it costs you with 9,300 gold. That's quite hefty, but it's not as pricey as some other ones, which cost you about 10,000 or 11,000 gold, such as the SU-130 PM, if I recall correctly. So what do you get for 9,300 gold? You get a 105mm gun, which is a tier 9 gun, and you get a vehicle that resembles a T110E5 very closely, but a tier 8. So what is this 105mm T140E3 gun? It has 360 alpha damage, which is, I think, the new average for heavy tanks at tier 8. Used to be 320, so that's very nice. You have 226mm of penetration, which is also very nice. Let's take a look at the ammunition real fast. Right here, just so you get a little bit of an idea, you have 1,000 meters per second shell velocity, 1,080. That's also very nice, and your APCR ammunition has penetration up to 2,555. And, no, not 2,555, 255. And shell velocity is 1,380 meters per second. So the shells fly very quickly, and then you have high explosive shells, which do not have special penetration, but they also fly very fast, and they do up to 550 damage if you manage to penetrate your opponents. Now, the reload time on this vehicle actually is quite good. You have 7.1 rounds per minute with the right equipment, and that really gives you a very flexible vehicle. 8.4 second reload time, or about 10 seconds without any equipment and without any skills. And that is fairly good in my opinion, because you do 360 damage per shot. The gun traverse for a heavy tank, 36.27, is not the worst, it's not the best, but for a heavy tank I'd say it's definitely okay, and I think you can live with that. You have 10 degrees of gun depression, which is amazing, 20 degrees of gun elevation, which is also great. You have 2.24 seconds aim time, which, yes, you could improve. 2.24 is still okay, it's still good, but if you want to, you can go with enhanced gun laying drive, which does give you a little bit of better aim time. As you can see, it does decrease the aim time by quite a bit, because I also have some things on this vehicle, some modifications or field modifications that make this tank, you know, fit exactly my kind of playstyle. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Gun dispersion, on the other hand, it's a heavy tank. It's not the best, but 0.35, you can work with that. DPM, 2,552 for a heavy tank at tier 8. That's pretty damn good. Moving on to the armor, and this is where it gets interesting, because let us take a moment to look at the hit points. I think this vehicle has 1,500 hit points, but since it's a heavy tank, it has the equipment slot for improved hardening. Now for this tank, I would really recommend, I would go for improved hardening. It's a survivability slot, I meant. Don't, like, I mean, you can also go for spall liner, you could also go for vents if you don't really care too much about getting more armor or hit points. Since high explosive is not that much of a problem anymore, spall liner could protect you from artillery, but I think it's a bit wasted on this vehicle. But I went for improved hardening to get more HP out of this tank, because I felt that this vehicle does need the HP a bit more, because of one very prevalent thing on top of the vehicle. Hull armor wise, this tank is like from the upper plate at the front. It's very similar to the E5, if I recall correctly. 152 millimeters of armor at the front, 76 on the side, 38 on the rear. That sounds very similarly to the E5. The lower plate is easy to go through, the upper plate is quite difficult to penetrate. It's just a bit narrower than the E5 in my opinion. Still, if you go through the lower plate, there's a high probability that you will penetrate, but at the same time, it is rounded, so it is a bit of a tricky place to shoot. The turret armor that you have here is 250 at the front, 140 on the side, and 40 on the rear, and it's really angled very nicely, as you can see. It's like this, I'm not even sure, like this oval-shaped turret. But there's a big tumor, a tumor that we have expected of American tanks, and it's this 50 cal and the commander's hatch on top, which is a massive weak spot. I don't have any mods installed, so I can't show you how thin it is, but it's extremely thin. Anything at tier 7 and 6 is able to penetrate it, so if you are going up against tier 9 and 10 tanks and tier 8s, well, they will not have to think about this at all. This tumor basically completely negates all the armor that you have on the turret, and it's the one place everyone shoots. But still, at the same time, because you have such good firepower, because you have so much gun depression, and also because your mobility is really impressive. 45 kilometers per hour top speed, about 16 horsepower per ton specific power to weight ratio, and 43.56 traverse speed, now which is really good for a heavy tank, obviously because of the skills that we have. This tank really has a lot of things going for itself. So the survivability tab, obviously it needs to be kind of balanced a little bit, and this is where it gets balanced, and that's how quickly you can balance the tank into something that is not extremely overpowered but only slightly powerful. Because if you manage to shoot this, which is a lot of the times, you can just basically take care of the Renegade. This is something that a lot of players will be annoyed about, so you'll always have to look, if you're trying to hide your weak spot, that you have a wall on the right side of your turret, so that you can hide this behind, or you always have to be on the move. It's quite easy to hit, it's not very difficult, it's a very large tumor on top, but that's how it's supposed to be. I will not change my opinion on that. I think it's supposed to be like that. It doesn't hold you back from having great games, but it does allow your enemies to actually balance this vehicle out a bit. Concealment, we don't even have to talk about it, it's a heavy tank. But spotting and view range, let's take a look at the turret so we'll see how far you can see. So this tank has 400 meter space view range, which is amazing for a tier 8 heavy tank. I don't really have any other tier 8 heavy in my mind, so you don't need binoculars or coded optics. You can just rely on the skills that you have on your crew. Just train the radio operator skill and the commander skill to extend the view range, and this gives you more capability in fighting against enemies. And the gun 0.35 is not the most accurate, but still it's going to work. It's not as bad as a Russian gun with 0.4, something like that, and it still works. So this tank is really nice, except for that one spot up there. So let's take a look at the equipment. This is where I once actually did pick the equipment I wanted to have. Gun rammer, I want to have the best possible rate of fire. I didn't put the gun laying drive over there because I think 2.24 is okay. You don't really need that, but with a gun laying drive in the scenario where you have 2.56 seconds aim time, that's where I say I draw the line and I want to have a gun laying drive in there. So what kind of field modifications did I pick? I wanted to get the increased, what is it? I went for increased hull traverse speed, which allows me to turn the tank even more faster. Now, I think with 43.56, it is maybe not even that much necessary because I do have the skills. I could pull that off, and I could put it to increased maintenance speed, which would give me plus 7% in maintaining top speed or maintaining speed. So I'm thinking about, I could change that as well. Wait, no, I don't want it pick that so far. And then on the other side, I went for... Let me see real fast. I went for increased accuracy instead of aiming speed because I have the equipment for that. Now you can also go for the aim speed and you would decrease the accuracy, so your accuracy would be at 0.37, but that was a bit too much for me, so I went down to 0.35. That's, I think, the sweet spot for me at least. Then moving on, I have more view range as well. It increases my stun duration and the additional stun duration. I know I'm in a heavy tank, but I have the feeling I'm not playing against extremely much artillery in the recent time, so I didn't really pick that. And then the final slot, which gives you either mobility or firepower, because this tank already has very good mobility, 45 kilometers per hour. You could increase it to even more. You could get the mobility upgraded to 50 kilometers per hour, you know, and even better specific power to weight, which, if you're honest, is kind of the meta. But I went with firepower to get that little bit of DPM additionally out of it, and I've been very happy with this loadout because this tank is a very good very good all-rounder. It just has this one weak spot on top. So let's talk about, is it worth for anyone? Is it worth it for the players that want to have an American heavy tank? Now, you have to keep in mind there is also the T-26 Patriot, which isn't too bad either. It's no slouch, 40 kilometers per hour. It has a different kind of gun, not the same kind of alpha, but the gun does have fairly nice DPM. Survivability-wise, the T-26 E5 definitely survives more based on the turret alone, but the lower plate and the upper plate maybe are a bit worse off. At least the upper plate is a bit worse off than on the Renegade, in my opinion. Other than that, they are very good vehicles. Then you also have the T-77, which is an auto-loading tank, and you also have the the M4Y or MIV4 or Y. Oh my god, I can't speak anymore today. And this tank as well, right here, I haven't played it yet, but it's also a very special vehicle. It has almost the same kind of gun. Dispersion is also very similar from the get-go. The rate of fire is just a lot worse. So, yes, I think that the Renegade is a really good tank. If you loved playing the E5, if you loved playing the M103, this is a tank that fits perfectly into that. If you're trying to go for American heavy tanks, this is the next line you want to grind. The M54 Renegade is definitely a tank worth thinking about. 9,300 gold, it's quite a bit, it's quite a lot, it's almost 10,000, but I think if you have it fully upgraded, it's a very good tank. It just has this very big tumor on top. Now, if you really hate the tumor, if you hate the tanks that have such big weak spots, this is maybe not for you, because you always have to keep that in mind. But I think that it balances things out. Where has the time gone where there is a weak spot on top? Certain tanks just need to have weak spots. Like this thing right here, the Chrysler GF. I hate this tank. It's not my main vehicle to go to, but it has such a difficult weak spot, which is the commander's cupola on top. But that cupola is like such a weird bouncy one that you almost don't manage to penetrate it, and the upper plate right here is almost impenetrable. So yeah, this is definitely a lot better than the Chrysler GF and other vehicles in the sense that it's more balanced. It's a lot of fun, the gun is great, the mobility is great, it's an all-round good package. Survivability-wise, without that weak spot, it would be an amazing tank, but with that weak spot, it's still a very good tank. So yeah, I would say I would buy it. I personally would buy it, and I've really enjoyed the vehicle myself. So, as always, put your comments in the comment section below and tell me what you guys think, and I'll see you guys on the next Advent Calendar Day. Until then, have a good one.